Today's the day the internet fantasy football community gets to rip on us because we are revealing our top 36 running back rankings for the 2025 fantasy football season and breaking them into tiers for you all. 36 running backs. That is a lot of players, so buckle up your seatbelts. We're going to fly. So we've broken down these running backs into 6 different tiers. You see it on the screen over in YouTube, S through E, but we've also kind of given a unique title to each of these tiers. Ty, the first one, the overall RB1s. It's Bijan Robinson, Christian McCaffrey, Jahmyr Gibbs, and Saquon Barkley. This is an order that I think people could fuss about quite a bit. In reality, I don't care which one of these guys you take first because I assume you have to agree, no matter what, you're looking at an RB1 overall upside, period, with these guys.
And the key word is upside. We're not saying it's a guarantee because there's a critique that you could pull from each of these guys. But when you're looking at sure bets or the most likely to, these are the 4 guys that clearly lead the race. You could have maybe some guys that we're going to have in the tier below. Not saying that we would completely disagree with you, but history has shown that like these 4 guys are definitely the trendsetters. They are definitely setting the pace for all the other running backs in fantasy.
And forgive us for not going analytically deep on these players. You probably don't want to hear us tell you how good all 4 of these players are for fantasy football this year. So Ty, maybe what I'll ask instead is how would you draft these players? In what order would you recommend fantasy players draft these running backs this year?
My current rankings has a McCaffrey. Yes, I am a CMC truther.
Wow,
CMC
he got bumped up to 1 for you. I did not know this.
I feel like he's been 1, or I took a couple receptions away from Bijan and McCaffrey just kind of made his way to the top.
Fell his way there.
Exactly. So yeah, McCaffrey is my first guy. And then Bijan second, Saquon third, and Jahmyr Gibbs fourth. And to be completely honest, there's different costs with these guys. Obviously, like Bijan, Saquon go ahead of Jahmyr and McCaffrey. McCaffrey, depending on your platform, maybe late first, early second. He's kind of made his way into being a mid-first round pick over in the best ball streets. So I would stick to my rankings. If I'm kind of towards the front end and I'm a McCaffrey truther, I'm not getting him in the second round. So kind of screw the ADP. Like I'm going to just go get the best player according to my rankings.
Sure. And that's an important thing to remember too, is that people can follow our rankings in our 2025 draft guide. But also if you have your own rankings, like stick to your own rankings with these running backs, right? Mine is Bijan, Gibbs, McCaffrey, Saquon. I really don't care if people want to draft Saquon ahead of McCaffrey, though. You have every reason to draft Saquon ahead of Christian McCaffrey. So for me, it is pretty clear. Like I want Bijan and Gibbs top 2, but between Saquon and McCaffrey, I don't have a strong bone to pick either way. We got a lot of other running backs, Ty, so I want to make sure we cruise through them, but also want to take a moment to recognize over the last month, 88% of the people who have watched our videos, Ty, haven't actually 88%? Yet. It's still at 88%. Hasn't really changed at all. 88.1 if you want to get specific with it. So let's take a moment. We can change that right now. Hit that subscribe button and turn on that notification bell as well. That way you'll know as soon as all of our most recent content comes out when we go live for live streams. We know you're prepping for your fantasy football season. Ty and I are prepping to beat each other in fantasy football this year. We're ready to kick Cameron's butt as well. He was too scared to come on the show today and actually accept that reality. So hopefully with all the insights we provide along the way, we remind you of the fun and camaraderie that comes with the game we all love in fantasy football. So we look forward to having you along for the ride this season. Let's move on to the A tier, Ty. This tier is like, I feel good having these guys as my RB1 on my fantasy football team. It's Devon Achane, Derrick Henry, Jonathan Taylor, Ashton Genty, Josh Jacobs, Bucky Irving, and Chase Brown. Now, this is where I'm going to say we're going to start skipping around a little bit, right? Because we've already talked about guys like Devon Achane and Ashton Genty and Chase Brown on previous episodes. So hopefully we're going to give you some new flavor here with a few other players we're going to talk about. Derrick Henry, we don't need to tell you how good he is. Obviously, if he keeps up the amount of touchdowns, the amount of volume that he's getting, and he stays healthy this year, obviously he could easily be in that S tier. Nobody's gonna pick a bone with you about that. Jonathan Taylor's a fascinating one, though. because he was a guy I was originally higher on earlier in the offseason. But the more research I've done, the more I've kind of processed the reality of this Indianapolis Colts offense this year. I've actually cooled off on him. So where do you actually stand on Jonathan Taylor? I don't know if I've actually heard your thoughts.
JT's an interesting one because you would think that, with a guy like Daniel Jones now in the building and the hope that he can be the guy that JT's ceiling goes up. I'm not exactly sure the ceiling goes drastically upwards. And that's, for the kind of running back 8, running back 9 price tag that you're going to be drafting Jonathan Taylor at. I'm not saying it's not a great price, but I find myself just going like, can he best this? Like, can he really be the running back 8 when, again, it's pure volume and touchdowns are really hit and miss? That's how I see it, at least. You would think that he's going to be the guy to get the rock if they get on the opposite side of the 40. I'm not so sure. I think, again, Jonathan Taylor, one of the most dynamic rushers who can soak up volume, and he's going to in this Colts offense, but with a question mark on touchdowns and a lack of receiving work ever since Shane Steichen got to Indianapolis, I just kind of find myself opting really for guys that go kind of after Jonathan Taylor. I understand people that could be in on him because the guy running back 5 in points per game without Anthony Richardson last year. So I understand that if that's a big piece as to why you'd be in. It's just not really for me when I know I can get guys that have similar upside finishing or upside in finishing out the year later.
So the thing you have to ask yourself with Jonathan Taylor is how often are the Colts going to be inside of the red zone? Assuming Daniel Jones is the starter. Daniel Jones will probably scoot a few in himself this year, but you still got to imagine it's Jonathan Taylor inside of the 20, inside of the 10, inside of the 5. The other question you have to ask yourself, how is the interior of this Colts offensive line going to bounce back this year? Obviously, you lose Ryan Kelly and Will Fries to the Minnesota Vikings. I mean, those are big pieces along an offensive line that was touted for many, many years in the past. So I don't know if I have a good answer for either of those. Those are the things that make me nervous about Jonathan Taylor. I feel very comfortable having him as my RB8 and having him as a top 10 running back, but could you sell me on Chase Brown instead being the RB8 this year and having him flip spots with Jonathan Taylor in my rankings, Chase Brown being the running back 8, Jonathan Taylor being the running back 11? How do you have it statted out, the split between quarterbacks? Because if Anthony Richardson comes back, it does throw a wrench in things for Jonathan Taylor that slightly.
So I've got Richardson playing 6 games, and I've got Daniel Jones playing the remaining 11. Okay. Equal rushing opportunity, really, in terms of pacing between Daniel Jones and Richardson. Not saying that like Daniel Jones is going to get or is going to have 10 carries a game like Richardson could. But I'm not exactly, you said it. Daniel Jones still has the ability to take it himself. So it's not like, we're getting Kirk Cousins where we have absolutely no reason to worry about a quarterback stealing a couple goal line carries and touchdowns, but it's not like Richardson level. So there is some give, and maybe that does help out Jonathan Taylor in the long run, but I don't know. I share the same sentiment as you. I feel like Jonathan Taylor, for as great as he was in the home stretch of last year, we're just kind of overlooking the fact that the guy was closer to 20 in points per game than he was 210.
Yeah. And again, comfortable having him as a top 10 running back. Don't think that overall RB1 is 100% within his range of outcomes, which I think, again, you say that kind of for all the guys in this tier because Josh Jacobs, another name, very comfortable having him inside of my top 12. But at the same time, I think there could be some changes on this Green Bay Packers offense that I've mentioned in the past. When Jordan Love was healthy and actually playing last year, we're talking about a team that was top 7 in pass rate over expectation. And I'm not saying they're going to be throwing the ball a crap ton this year, but I don't know if they're going to run the ball at such a rate with Josh Jacobs when they were kind of forced to without a fully healthy Jordan Love, with the makeshift wide receiver group that was still Jaden Reed and Romeo Dobbs, and whenever Dontavian Wicks could get his hands on the football and keep them on the football. I feel like Josh Jacobs isn't one that we need to go into extensive detail on, but at the same time, do you have any like major concerns around Josh Jacobs, or are you kind of expecting what we're going to get from last year?
I wouldn't go as far to say we're going to get a 1-for-1 of what we got last year, just because there was circumstances that did lead this offense to relying so heavily on Josh Jacobs. The team was fifth in team run plays per game, so they very much committed to the run game. So yeah, it would hurt Josh Jacobs if the team finds themselves closer to 10 or middle of the pack than to being top 5. But that being said, I don't see Marshawn Lloyd as a threat. I don't see Emmanuel Wilson as a threat. Like, Josh Jacobs could be on the field a lot. And you may not think that 36 receptions is a lot. It makes a difference, for a guy like Jonathan Taylor, who got literally half of that, right? So yep. I'm not saying that just because we're going to get fully healthy Jordan Love, that this team is automatically going to, stop running the ball. Maybe there's a little more downside to Josh Jacobs or with the price tag, at least, because I think this was also talked about last year. But the difference is that Josh Jacobs is going 4th, 5th round. And now this year he's kind of going 2nd round, beginning of 3rd if he slides.
Yeah, I definitely don't think you just copy paste last year, because that's insanely silly and it doesn't take anything into account that happened this offseason for the Green Bay Packers. Whether you want to look at the release of Jair Alexander, whether you want to look at them drafting Matthew Golden, what that says about what could potentially happen with this offense, the scenarios they find themselves in. But I'm not convinced we get another like top 5 season out of Josh Jacobs. It's within his range of outcomes, absolutely. But again, I prefer Achane. I prefer Derrick Henry. I prefer Ashton Genty. When I tweak Chase Brown a little bit, I might actually prefer Chase Brown to Josh Jacobs, which just kind of puts him in that RB 10 to 12 range for me. And I don't know if he can wiggle his way out of that. He's a fine and safe pick for your team. I don't think he's going to go out and lose your league this year, but I digress. We'll keep it moving here, Ty, because so many more running backs to talk about. Bucky Irving's another one, though, where Tristan Wirfs now placed on the PUP list. People say, well, it's only one part of the offensive line. I say, I actually think that's probably going to impact Bucky Irving, at least at the start of the season, maybe more than people are accounting for. That's not to say I'm 100% out on Bucky Irving. He's still the top 12 guy for me, but where do you land?
I think a great example is just looking at what happened to the Minnesota Vikings offensive line when they lost Christian Darrisaw and they replaced it with Cam Robinson. It was not the same. And not just from a passing standpoint, but from a rushing game standpoint. And unfortunately, Tampa Bay doesn't have that luxury of going from Tristan Wirfs to a competent piece. Cam Robinson is not.
I was wondering where you're going to go with Cam Robinson. I'm like, competent would probably be the best I would have given Cam Robinson last year.
Yeah, Cam Robinson's a starter. He's a veteran of some sort, so I have to give him his props there. But it wasn't all pro or Pro Bowl worthy play.
It was not as clean of a transition as many expected it would be.
Correct. Now, the difference you could say is that Cam Robinson's learning on the fly because it's right in the middle of the season versus Tampa has now got training camp. But again, you're not replacing Tristan Wirfs with what is a proven player. You're replacing him, according to our lads, with Charlie Heck. That's
what the heck, man.
Yeah, what the heck? That's literally what the heck. It has to matter. It would. Yeah, just focus on hosting over there, okay? But it has to count for something. Losing arguably your most important and your best piece on your offensive line has to count for something. So could Bucky, by 2 weeks from now, when we release our updated version of our draft guide, which by the way, you should have already bought and looked into, but
don't know why you wouldn't have it already. I mean, that's
just
silly.
Just saying, but Bucky Irving could be closer to 15 at that point. We're not And at that point, we're not saying that at least I wouldn't be saying that Bucky Irving is a bad pick.
No,
I'm tempering the expectations, and that a lot of people would be like, hey, sophomore leap going into year 2. It would be a pretty slow start, and maybe then it hits in the second half of the year. But at that point, it may be a little too late.
Yeah, I'm not saying you need to fade Bucky Irving out of this universe. It's simply he's going as the RB9 in drafts right now. And I'm saying, yeah, I'd be much more comfortable around like an RB12 price tag. Like, would you be surprised at all? You see this over on Underdog. We'll hear from them a little bit later where you can go draft against real people for real prizes right now. I wouldn't be surprised. Should Bucky Irving actually be drafted closer to the Kyren Williams, Breece Hall range than he should be to the Chase Brown, Josh Jacobs range right now?
I think so. And the thing is, maybe that's just me being a little too worried that Rachaad White is still going to be a thorn in Bucky's side. But that I have kind of always felt that about Bucky, is that it should be probably closer, like you said, to the Kyren and Breece Halls than, again, to Chase Brown and Josh Jacobs, even Jonathan Taylor.
Oh, interesting. You would put Jonathan Taylor into that group even. I'm very comfortable having Jonathan Taylor like kind of in the middle end of this tier. I wouldn't put him in the Kyren Breece tier. I think there's a case for Kyren or Breece to come up, which we'll talk about them momentarily here, but I don't know if I would push Jonathan Taylor down that far personally.
Well, I meant that like JT to Chase Brown, they all go within
8 picks. Yeah.
Yeah. Like Bucky should not be in that group. It should be closer. Jonathan Taylor's still in that group. That's what I meant.
Okay. I see what you're saying. Yeah. Because he and Bucky, JT and Bucky are being drafted basically back to back right now, according to ADP, average draft position. Versus, is there a case where Bucky should actually be going after Chase Brown? Maybe before Kyren, right around Kyren, but like there's a tier of wide receivers there from Garrett Wilson to JSN that all go before Kyren Williams and Breece Hall. Should Bucky actually maybe fall in that range somewhere? Speaking of the running backs we talked about in Kyren Williams and Breece Hall, they do fall into our B tier, which actually starts with Alvin Kamara, then Kyren Williams, Joe Mixon, Breece Hall, Amari, and Hampton in this tier. You've already heard us talk about Kamara, how much we love Alvin Kamara this year. He'll be just fine with Tyler Shuck at quarterback. Probably doesn't possess that top 10, top 12 upside. Like, okay, that's false. He definitely does, but like,
it happened last year.
As it's been in previous years.
Yeah, it happened last year on the back of a career high in touches.
Right. And that's no guarantee for this year when Tyler Shuck is your quarterback. And I don't know. Who knows what the heck the Saints are going to do in their quarterback room? That's all I'm trying to say. Yet Alvin Kamara still should very comfortably, in my opinion, be drafted as a top 15 running back. Apparently that's not common consensus, though. Kyren Williams is a guy we haven't talked about, though, Ty, much this offseason. If you've watched our shorts, I've talked about Kyren. I have said that this is the year I'm out on Kyren, when everybody wanted to be out last year because of all the punt return and Blake Corum drafting stuff. All three of us were like, this is silly. Why would they not? It's Kyren and Blake Corum. Like, that's it. And Blake Corum is carbon copy Kyren. So why would they just not run Kyren? Why is Blake Corum not an insurance policy instead? So we were still in on Kyren last year, but now this year is the year where I'm like, you know what? I'm more out than in on Kyren, mostly because I know the offensive line was banged up last year, but if you turn on the film, like, it wasn't great last year. It really wasn't. Kyren was unfortunately high stuff percentage despite facing a bottom rate in stacked boxes. I mean, he had, I believe it was a top 10 rate in light boxes that he faced last year, yet he was like outside of the top 40 or he was outside of the top 40 in stuffed runs. If you get that's not a good thing. That's what I'm trying to say. I'm like, how do I communicate this stat without it making it seem like he was actually good against getting on stuffed runs last year? I digress. I also believe the existence of Jarquez Hunter is very different than the existence of Blake Corum. Maybe touch on that more in a minute. I want to hear your thoughts first. Are you in or out on Kyren?
I
And
never
maybe
really
in or
want
out
to.
is too strict.
Yeah, because every player has a right price, and I just think right
Totally.
now Kyron is overpriced. You said it in your short in your TikTok. If you think that Kyron can get another 300 touches, then you are most
Draft
definitely in
away.
on Kyron. Right.
Draft away. Yeah, totally.
We are not of that opinion because um the yes, he does get enough receiving work, but the receiving work won't, suddenly go up if we see a drop in carries. And the main reason to transition us into this Jarquez Hunter conversation, why we were not afraid to keep drafting Kyron last year, you touched on it, because Blake Corum and Kyron are so similar.
Mhm.
Jarquez is different, like very different than what they have with Kyron and Blake Corum. And for a team that isn't really going to get a ton of explosive plays in the run game because their offensive line, they struggle, right? Like it's not a top tier offensive line unit. It just kind of does just enough to get the running backs and really just Kyron going. Getting Jarquez is going to help this team get explosive. So with that being said, we're not saying that Jarquez is going to overtake Kyron Williams, but the drop in carries as touchdown, I don't want to call him touchdown dependent, but the dude's really relied on touchdowns last year. And if we're going to get a drop in opportunities, we could get a drop in touchdowns. Kyron could find himself closer to 15, maybe even closer to 20 if we're not even careful. So again, it's not necessarily that like I'm out on Kyron Williams. I just struggle to get behind the price that he's at right now. The guy was outside the top 45 in missed tackles forced per attempt and yards after contact per attempt. So like it was a pure volume play last year that kept Kyron very relevant. And I've got those question marks this year that it won't happen again.
Mm-hmm.
And that's enough for me to be like, not this year, not this year.
People are like, well, we've seen Sean McVay stick to one guy. I've also seen Sean McVay switch his opinion on a dime on who that guy actually is, too. We all thought Cam Akers was the guy being drafted as RB20. Well, that was already 2023. All of a sudden, Cam Akers is dead to Sean McVay. He's dealt mid-season, and Kyron Williams is now your guy who's getting 300 plus touches. I'm not saying that's the trajectory Kyron Williams is on. I'm worried we're flying a bit too close to the sun here. And the way Sean McVay talks about Jarquez Hunter in comparison to a Blake Corum or a Kyron Williams, Sean McVay has said we had a vision for him and how he fit. And how he fit was creating more freaking explosives for this team because Lord knows Kyron Williams couldn't do that last year. And blame it on the offensive line. He improved over the second half of the season. Sure. But Sean McVay knows you got to get explosives if you want to push the football in the NFL. He's called Jarquez Hunter a home run hitter. His superpower is speed. He's really fast. You want to know what Kyron Williams isn't? Fast. He's like, I don't know what to tell you there. So for me, there's much more of for me, a clear path for Jarquez Hunter to come in and play a supplemental role to Kyron Williams that doesn't involve him being on the field, getting all the receiving work, getting all the rush attempts. Where I think Kyron Williams, they can actually bring him off this year. Efficiency might increase, sure, but like looking at our draft guide, maybe call me a hypocrite. I do have Kyron statted out for 300 touches this year. I have him for 303. Still my RB17.
Now that's fascinating. I think the big discussion that we've had in the past too about ambiguity in backfields and why you should attack it and not stay away from it. And when we say attack, we're saying whatever the latest price is on one of those guys in the mix, invest in those. Why I find we've explained why we see ambiguity in this backfield because there's different skill sets. And we've said too, Kyron won't bust. But why there's suddenly ambiguity besides the talent of this, or besides the production of Kyron, is because maybe I'm going to ruffle some feathers here. Kyron isn't exactly like an elite talent that the team is going to opt to continue to give him the ball.
No.
They've been giving him the ball because it's the best that they got, if that makes sense.
Mm-hmm.
So I think a lot of people will look at the production of Kyren over the last 2 years and go, well, why won't they do it again? Different circumstances this time around. And that causes enough fear to say, man, we got to be careful with this one.
Let's move on to another guy who probably questionable how many explosives he's going to create this year, Joe Mixon. Zero explosives. Is he Baker Mayfield? Zero. How many explosive runs will Joe Mixon have this year? Zero. That's not true. But playing behind, on paper, a worse offensive line. But last year's offensive line play was absolutely horrendous. Yet, casually through the first 13 weeks, he was the running back 2 in fantasy points per game. Look, I honestly, ADP of RB19 right now, I honestly think people just have such a bad taste in their mouth of how Joe Mixon ended last season, when he was the RB51 in fantasy points per game from week 15 on. I think people just have a bad taste in their mouth, and they're just punishing Joe Mixon for it. To me, like, if the production was top 5 already last year behind really, really bad offensive line play, and on paper it's worse this year, look, I think like my ranking of RB14 for Joe Mixon is like, I feel like that's appropriate. I feel like RB19, you're like, I don't know if you're accounting any upside that he has here after what he showed you last year.
Yeah, I think that's a good way to say it, because he's currently my running back 18 as well. And I can't really make pinpoint why he's there when I'm in full agreement with you in the sense that like this offense should be getting better. The many years of Joe Mixon's not efficient, so you shouldn't invest in him. When he's
just all the more true last year. I mean, like
exactly. Yeah. So I think maybe it is just because I'm getting swayed too much by current costs and ADPs and stuff that I'm like, well, Joe Mixon, I mean, currently in best ball streets, he's closer to 20. He's closer to my ranking than he is to yours. I get the hesitancy with people, but we've had hesitancies on Joe Mixon for the past 3 years, and he's done nothing but consistently be a top 12 guy. So that will be one I need to go back and revise again, because running back 18 doesn't sound right for Mixon. You can justify it in your head in some ways. He's another year older. It's a bad offensive line. Receiving work will take a hit. Like, you can justify it in so many different ways.
Yep.
But you do need to just call a spade and just say that hasn't mattered. Like, Joe Mixon still produces.
Where do we account for last year in this equation, right? Because that has to mean something based on what we've seen as well. People make that argument for Kyren. Well, he did it last year despite being in it. Where's that for Joe Mixon? Let's be a little bit more consistent there. Breece Hall, though, that's one where we need to look at last year and be like, something or nothing. And I'm shocked how out I am on Breece Hall. I shouldn't say out. Where my projection came in on Breece Hall. I have him closer to 20 than I do 15.
Mm-hmm.
I'm a little bit concerned about that. I don't think the Justin Fields impact should shake up my Breece Hall ranking that much. I probably do need to filter a few more receptions to Breece Hall. Justin Fields still top 10 in check down rate the last 2 years. I don't know where my concern for Breece Hall is coming in, but again, being drafted as RB12, he's one of my lower RB exposures. I just don't find myself wanting to pull the trigger on Breece Hall for where he's being drafted right now.
I just think the best way to explain my expectations for this Jets team is just kind of empty volume.
Sure.
I just don't know how often they're going to score. And there are the concerns. We've talked about it plenty. This team may look to get Braylon Allen, Isaiah Davis more involved. And if we're going to lose out on those kind of high value touches for Breece, he's going to repeat what he did last year as a running back, as like the running back 15 in points per game. it's just going to look different, right? So it's not going to be completely inefficient, but it won't be as many receptions, but the scoring won't be any better. So
right, that's what I'm trying to figure out is the Jets aren't going to be this high scoring offense. They're also not going to throw the ball a ton. I don't project them to be like a upper half of the league passing rate this year. So that should favor Breece Hall, right? But then it's like, well, Justin Fields is going to take his rush attempts. There's just, I feel like there's this wide range of outcomes for Breece Hall this year. I just feel like 12 might be at the ceiling. And that's why I'm just not willing to pull the trigger there. I have a few shares sprinkled here and there just to make sure I do get the exposure. Because what if he does come back and have a top 5 season? That's not out of the realm of possibilities, but I don't know, man. I'm not stoked to be drafting Breece Hall at RB12.
Yeah, I want to hear the people that are in on Breece Hall at this point and just like, please enlighten us, because the reason for being in on Breece Hall in the years past was because of the receiving work. At least that's how I see it.
Yep.
I think there's going to be enough of a hit on the receiving game. Sure, he can still get 60 targets, but that's not what we're used to with Breece Hall. So again, I want to hear what the pro Breece Hall case is to getting back into being into the top 10, because there was faith. Obviously, it was because the team had Aaron Rodgers, sorry.
Yep.
But it was going as a running back 2 last year in drafts.
Yeah, should there be a steeper penalty for what we saw last year? RB2 burned you really bad. Like, is RB12 far enough down? I don't know. Let us know in the comments where you all sit on Breece Hall. I'm actually curious where the public sits, because ADP says RB12, which is driven by public, but also at the same time, I don't know if I've seen many pro Breece Hall takes out there outright. You can also draft all these players. We talked about ADP right now. The most sharp ADP right now is over on Underdog. That's where real people are drafting for real prizes against one another. We'll take a quick break here. All the contests they have in store for you this summer. Today's show is brought to you by our friends over at Underdog, home of Best Ball Mania 6. There are $15 million in prizes up for grabs, with $2 million going to first place and another $1 million going to second place. Entering is super easy. You join a draft with 11 other people, select your team, and Underdog will automatically generate your highest scoring lineup each week. Essentially, you get all the fun of drafting with zero stress of making the wrong decision on who to start. Underdog hosts a variety of other contests as well, ranging from $3 entries to $500 entries, so there's something for everybody's pocketbook. If you're not on Underdog yet, use the code FELLAS when you sign up, because they'll give you up to $1,000 in bonus credits to play with, and we'll give you our 2025 draft guide for free. Again, that's code FELLAS over on Underdog. Now let's get you back to the rest of the show. Alrighty, Ty, we got 3 more tiers to fly through here. We'll move it on to the C tier. The tier that remains unnamed, because it's really a unique hodgepodge of players. I'm just going to ramble them off to you. Chuba Hubbard, James Conner, Ken Walker, James Cook, Aaron Jones, Caleb Johnson, RJ Harvey, Travion Henderson. Maybe we just call this can we call this like the blended family of running backs? There's something something for everybody. Yep. That's what we'll call this tier. Something for everybody.
True.
Because James Cook and James Conner are your 2 vets. Ken Walker and James Cook are on the younger side of being in the league. You know, they're 4th year backs at this point. Aaron Jones is another vet. And you got 3 rookies. All right. Which direction do you want to take this first? Would you rather talk about the Ken Walker, James Cook kind of players first, or would you rather talk about the rookies?
Let's do the rookies. Let's switch it up a little bit.
All right, we'll go from the back of the tier first. So Caleb Johnson, RJ Harvey, Travion Henderson is how this tier shakes out. I'll ask you first, how do you rank these players?
Great question. I should have this up just ready to go.
Yeah.
I go Caleb Johnson, RJ Harvey, Travion Henderson.
Okay, interesting. And now here I am finding my rankings as well. I have RJ Harvey, Caleb Johnson, Travion Henderson. So I just have Harvey and Johnson switched. Unfortunately, I do think Travion finds himself at the bottom of this group, mostly because I think he has I don't know if that's a true statement though. Who has the most stiff competition out of these three? Is it Jalen Warren, J.K. Dobbins, or Ramondre Stevenson? Feels like three guys who are all going to play a part in some capacity. But like, which one is the most difficult for one of these guys to overcome?
Well, I would say it's J.K. Dobbins.
Right, I would agree. I almost said Ramondre Stevenson, and I'm like, actually, I think it's J.K. Dobbins after what we saw last year.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, J.K. Dobbins is probably the stiffest competition for any of these guys between them and a running back too. But I think the reason why I've still got Travion at the bottom of this is because I still have question marks about how this New England offense is going to operate, where I can make the assumption with Pittsburgh between Jalen Warren and Caleb Johnson as the bigger back in a better fit in an Arthur Smith offense, that Caleb Johnson should be the guy over Jalen Warren. And maybe that's just because I'm not really a Jalen Warren fan. I don't know what the appeal was. I've made the case before. If Jalen Warren couldn't beat out a horribly inefficient Najee Harris, I don't know how he's going to be able to do it against a Caleb Johnson. RJ Harvey, I'm a fan of the Denver offense. Yep. And in some weird way, I don't really care how it looks. I just have a feeling that they're going to be so much more productive and efficient compared to New England that I would just give the edge. That's why I do give the edge to RJ Harvey, even though I have it all statted out. Don't worry. I don't pull rankings just out of thin air. But yeah, like Travion just kind of by process of elimination in some ways just is kind of at the bottom of this three.
You named it at the top. I want to see how the Patriots end up deploying Travion Henderson. It's the most explosive player out of these three. If Ramondre wasn't there, I would absolutely potentially have him closer to Amari and Hampton, who
Correct.
Gets Najee Harris, who's dealing with, a firework incident, but my eye. But yeah, I want to see how the Patriots deploy Travion. I don't know. I know the vision is to get him on the field and get the football into his hands because he's going to create explosives for that offense, which they desperately need. But how does that compare into Ramondre Stevenson being on the field as well? Will the Patriots offense be good enough to move the ball at a positively enough rate for Travion Henderson to be a factor? Where I feel like for the Broncos, you named it, I just don't have that concern with Bo Nix and Sean Payton running the show. And the Steelers, Arthur Smith has just found a way to keep this offense prevalent. That's kind of where I'm at. So the Patriots are like the wild card, it feels like, out of that bunch.
I would understand if you have Travion ahead of Caleb Johnson.
Totally.
In terms of like, I'm not a fan of an Arthur Smith offense and I'm just going to trust the playmaker in New England. Sure. I get that. I think for sure you and I would both be like, yeah, RJ Harvey needs to stay ahead of Travion just for offense sake.
Yep. Good players and good teams, right? Sometimes it's that simple. And this goes to show too, I'm not like trying to like find an excuse to get out of liking Travion. My running back exposures heavily lean towards Caleb Johnson and RJ Harvey ahead of Travion Henderson, purely at cost and where they're going in drafts and who's available on the board and where my preference is. So, again, it's kind of a toss up. You could pick any of those three. They all go back to back in drafts. It's RJ Harvey, Travion Henderson, Caleb Johnson. That's the running back 21 through 23 in drafts right now. So pick your flavor there. Let's move on to these fourth year running backs now, though. Ty, Ken Walker and James Cook. I actually don't know your ranking on Kenneth Walker. I'm the irresponsibly high one on Ken Walker this year. I always have one player that I feel like I'm just like irresponsibly high on every year. Last year it was DK Metcalf. God forbid it's another Seahawk this year, and now it's Ken Walker. I don't know if this is an offense I want to be betting on, but maybe I'm just a believer in what Clint Kubiak can do in an outside zone run scheme, and how Ken Walker can actually catch passes out of how he deploys his running backs.
Yeah, so Ken Walker's my running back 20 right now.
Okay, you and I are on polar opposite sides then, because Ken Walker's my running back 13.
Yeah. That being said, that probably needs to come up a little bit because I do. Yeah,
ADP shoots us right in the middle. RB 17.
Yeah, right. That's probably where he should be. Like we stat out guys for full 17 game seasons unless we hear otherwise.
Totally.
So if you remove the injury risk, because again, Ken Walker seems to miss time every single year. Not just him. That's not just a him thing. That's a running back thing. But in some weird way, I'm more worried about Ken Walker with Zach Charbonnet, with Clint Kubiak coming in.
That's
than
fair.
in years past. And like last year, it was really, really easy because like we didn't need to read any tea leaves or anything. Like the coaches in Seattle were just flat out saying like Ken Walker's the guy, right?
Mm-hmm.
I wonder if it's going to be a little more of a guessing game this year. And I think if that happens, that means that we were probably looking at some kind of split. And look, when Zach Charbonnet has had the opportunity to be the guy without Ken Walker, he's been really good. He's been really good. So I get the optimism for what we saw last year in the receiving game with Clint Kubiak's system coming in. Like it should fit Ken Walker really, really well. But I'm also like, Zach Charbonnet's still gonna be there, right? Like and maybe this is a Rachaad White syndrome kind of thing where I'm putting too much stock into the running back 2 here. But
Sure.
I was a fan of Charbonnet coming out. I think I'm always going to be a fan of Charbonnet. And when he's had the opportunity to be the guy, he's come through.
I hated when he landed in Seattle, Zach Charbonnet, that is, because I was a big believer in Zach Charbonnet too. I loved his talent. And I'm like, why in the world would you nerf Ken Walker like this? Now, I think it's up for Clint Kubiak to decide how he really wants to deploy these backs. It's not that I'm like all the way out on Zach Charbonnet. I still have him statted out. How many touches did I give him this year? He's sitting at like 140 touches this year. I just have Ken Walker slated for actually a hefty amount of receiving work. And I think that's really what's elevating him above some of these other guys is I do think he still stays involved in the passing attack this year. Even if it's not at an absurd rate like he was on, he had like a 4-game pace last year where he was like 8 targets in like 3 consecutive games. I'm like, this is not your calling card yet. Here you are. I still think he's the primary back here. I just don't have Zach Charbonnet weighted in as heavily as other people do, mostly because I'm just a believer in the talent of Ken Walker. That's where I'm at. Let's touch on James Cook before we shift tiers here. Ty, big regression coming in here. He's a guy that all of us consensus are out on. He's our running back 20 consensus. I've still got him at 16. I'm closest to ADP, goes off the board as a running back 15 right now, but you're at 19. Cameron's down at 22. Touchdown regression is incoming. Absolutely. What else is factored in for you?
I'll be honest. It really is just touchdown regression. I don't think the touches necessarily change here in Buffalo. I think the offense is pretty set in how they're going to attack defenses. They spread the ball around and they use Josh Allen's legs and they try to run the ball to keep defenses honest. If you were to take James Cook's 18 total touchdowns and cut that in half last year, he was the running back 8 overall. Again, cut the touchdowns in half. He would have been the running back 19 overall. And that's where I have him in my rankings. So again, I don't really have much changing for this Buffalo offense. I just don't think we're going to see as many touchdowns. Now, that being said, if he, I quite literally have the touchdowns cut in half. So 50% regression is pretty massive.
That's steep, in my opinion.
That's steep. That is pretty steep. But even if I, were to have James Cook at 12 touchdowns, it would only be up to like 14 or 15. It wouldn't be
already at his ceiling, basically.
Right. So it's not that I'm not a fan of James Cook, because here's the beauty of James Cook in drafts right now is that he goes as a running back 15, at least again in best ball. The regression is being baked in with the price, right? People are expecting it. So I don't mind that price, but I try to caution people if they were to be outright saying, well, look what he did last year. Like, why shouldn't he be closer to 10? Why shouldn't he be closer to 12? And it's like, because James Cook that was the first year we had ever seen it from James Cook, because before that, it wasn't even close. He hadn't even topped 8, right?
Yeah.
Like it was. So, again, it's not that I'm a huge like anti James Cook guy, but I try to keep it realistic, and saying that after saying out loud 50% regression in the touchdown department maybe isn't super realistic, but that's my effort to keep it realistic.
Sure. Well, I was gonna say, and I'm not like the regression's coming, but when you said 50% and that's how you had it, I'm like, oh boy, okay, that's where we are different, because I still have James Cook for 11 touchdowns this year, 11 and a half touchdowns this year, which again is still a very steep decline from the 18 he had last year. But also got to consider how Ray Davis is going to factor in here if he gets more touches this year. TBD. I don't think he's not like a Zach Charbonnet level threat, obviously, but something to consider with James Cook. How hard is the regression going to hit? And if he does it back-to-back years, well, then maybe we're having an entirely different conversation next offseason. Or honestly, frankly, I think we're probably having the same one. It's like, all right, fool me once, shame on you. Fool me twice. All right, shame on me. Maybe we do change our minds next year. We'll see. Well,
and the last thing here with James Cook, we didn't even mention Ray Davis getting more involved potentially here.
I just think he does, and I don't know. I still have Cook at RB16, but like, again, that's like close to a ceiling for me. I don't see a path back to top 12, top 10 for James Cook this year.
49.2% snap share last year and career year in touchdowns. So something's going to give.
Something's going to give.
It's just a matter of like how much will it give.
Yep, 100%. D tier Ty. This tier is just what did we title this tier? I said it's opportunity versus downside. That's what we titled this tier, because it's Isaiah Pacheco, DeAndre Swift, Travis Etienne, Quinshon Judkins, who we'll touch on. We understand everything that's going on. Tony Pollard, David Montgomery, and Brian Robinson Jr. We've already talked about the likes of DeAndre Swift and Travis Etienne this offseason. Same with Tony Pollard. I want to focus on the guys who Nick Ericolano tweeted out something interesting. The reason why you're taking dart throws on Isaiah Pacheco and Brian Robinson this year is because those are the guys who could potentially give you like a 2023 Raheem Mostert season, where you're not doing it on the volume. You're not doing it because they're 100% locked and loaded, the bell cow with our offense, but you're doing it on the hopes that they're in good enough of offenses that could get them to the 12 to 15 touchdown range on the rushing department. I'm not saying that's going to happen for any of these dudes, but like, that's why I'm willing to click on an Isaiah Pacheco, a Brian Robinson ahead of a Tony Pollard, because I'm just a believer in those offenses rather than the Tennessee Titans. Kind of cut and dry. That's how I'm looking at it.
Right. Opportunity versus downside. The opportunity, like Nick said, of being the 2023 Raheem Mostert or being the David Montgomery over the last 2-3 years.
Right. Yes. What did they turn to David Montgomery? Right. That's probably a better example.
Versus the downside of actually they don't get those kind of opportunities and the floor kind of falls out. And it's really easy to like make that case for Tony Pollard, for a guy that's been the volume guy over the last 2 years, and at least in his first year in Tennessee last year. Tyjae Spears gets more receiving work and starts snarfing some of the carries that he was getting. Tony Pollard is not as intriguing as he was at draft time. Travis Etienne, same thing. Might start out as a guy. We've had our conversations about Etienne before.
Yep.
For all we know, it could be a third of the season going to Etienne, a third of the season going to Tank, and a third going to Brace Hall too. Like that.
Yeah.
Like, again, that's the downside that we are kind of talking about, where things don't go the way that we're expecting. The opportunity doesn't get to them like we expect it to, and the downside is massive.
Right. Well, and go back to the touchdown guys. The downside is they score 8 touchdowns this year, and they're just like a middling, low-end RB2, high-end RB3 the entire year, right? But the upside you do potentially chase there is, hey, what if they're in the red zone? And I know Jaden Daniels can run a few in himself, but I don't think Patrick Mahomes is going to take 6 to 8 rushing touchdowns this year. If they're there, I got to imagine Isaiah Pacheco is going to be the guy. So what happens if this Chiefs offense improves despite the whole Rashee Rice incident ruling? What if, right? Like, that's the upside you're chasing with all these guys. They're either the lead guy and they score the touchdowns, or they end up just kind of being middling RB, low end RB2s, high end RB3s, or they just kaput out entirely if your name is Travis Etienne, or I mean, again, dare I suggest Tony Pollard if Tyjae Spears actually turns things around this year. Quinshon Judkins, I do want to touch on him because obviously we got all the things with Quinshon Judkins happening right now. I am not an expert in the law. I do not care to analyze his situation. All we know is it's not good. All right, he did a bad thing, and that impacts how much time he could be playing on the field. I haven't adjusted my rankings yet because I don't know how much to adjust my rankings. That's the big thing with Quinshon Judkins. I don't know if he's missing 6 games, 10 a season. Is he going to be back in the NFL? I don't know what I should be taking away from Quinshon Judkins yet. With that in mind, what are you doing with him in drafts?
Oh, I am not just for the potential suspension side of things. I don't know why we're trying to go after the lead guy on what is projected to be one of the worst offenses in the league.
Hey, that's just another lens to look at this through. It's another reason to not draft him.
Like, am I wrong for saying that we might just be looking at the 2024 Tony Pollard, and not in the sense that like he's the absolute workhorse in that offense, but he can lead the backfield in touches, but where are the touches going? That's the thing. And if the team's not going to be scoring often and Judkins, isn't getting enough receiving work for whatever the reason may be, I just don't have high hopes then. And so then when I'm looking at this tier and I'm like, right, Quinshon Judkins closer to 30 than he is to 25. That's where Pacheco goes. But like Brian Robinson, running back 29, Quinshon Judkins, running back 31 right now. I'm opting for Brian Robinson almost every single time because I'm like, better offense, more scoring opportunities. It's
pretty easy
math for me.
Yeah, it's pretty easy math when you write out the equation that way. I had Quinshon Judkins as my running back 29, fully in context without knowing he was going to do an inhumane thing to another human being. And so I was already like RB26 is a little bit steep for me. I don't want to say steep. It's like just out of reach of where I really wanted to draft him because of those exact reasons. Cleveland Browns offense, you drafted Dylan Sampson as well. I don't think Jerome Ford is just going to disappear.
Most experienced guy in that backfield.
I for whatever that's worth, right? I'm not saying it's everything, but I'm also not saying it's nothing. I still want to take him ahead of Jaylen Warren, though. Who's next in the pecking order after Brian Robinson in terms of average draft position? Goes as the running back 32. Judkins going as 31. I find it hard to talk myself into Jaylen Warren over Quinshon Judkins, personally. I've been doing it because I'm like, I might be drafting a 0 in Quinshon Judkins. It's a reason why I've still clicked on Warren a few times. Man, some of those guys going after him, I just find it really hard to click. Travis Etienne is the easy one. That's the one I just excuse myself for doing every time. I'm like, yeah, you know what? Could be top 20 this year. Yep, good by me. Well, like, I admittedly, I'm a little bit of a sucker. I think Ron Stewart put it out. If Judkins is past pick 100, he'll still be a slappy. I'm kind of leaning that way because when it's him and Jaylen Warren on the board, I don't want to click either, but I need a running back, so I'll click Judkins.
Well, and maybe this is a great time to transition into this last tier because the last tier of guys are who you're looking at if you're not going to be taking Quinshon Judkins. And
exactly.
I think you can make the case that, like, okay, Jaylen Warren aside, all those guys, Tyjae Spears, J.K. Dobbins, Javonte Williams, Tyron Tracy, go much later. So then, again, you're pushing back that running back pick. And there's equal, aside from one guy, in my opinion, there's equal just categorized as grossness that you're just like, gosh, I don't feel great about doing that at all. Yep. And I think ultimately I'm just going to probably opt to just not take any of them except for one of these guys and just look handcuffs at that point. But you bring up a good point though, of just like at some point the price does get too low, but everything is such in a limbo right now just because of the situation that you sometimes will just tell yourself, you know what, I don't want to think about that right now. So I'm just going to kind of put it out of sight, out of mind.
Because what happens when it's the NFL does something and it's only 6 games? There's still the world where Quinshon Judkins outscores a Tyrone Tracy who could lose a decent amount of work to Cam Scadaboo by the end of the year, when Javonte Williams doesn't actually end up being the RB1 in Dallas, or it's such a putrid RB1 role to hold that it actually doesn't matter. When J.K. Dobbins is playing behind R.J. Harvey, getting outshined by R.J. Harvey, when Jalen Warren, unfortunately, can't get on the field enough behind Caleb Johnson, when God forbid, Tyjae Spears and Tony Pollard are in a 50-50 time. Like, at what point do you look into say, yeah, Judkins might just be the best option here? If you got to pick one of these guys out of the last year, though, Tyrone Tracy, Javonte Williams, J.K. Dobbins, Jalen Warren, Tyjae Spears, which one? They're all on the board, only running backs you can click right now. Which one are you clicking?
J.K. Dobbins.
I think that's where I lean as well. It's between him and Tyjae.
I've adjusted my rankings a bit on JK. He's not inside my top 30. He's my running back 32 now, and I feel a lot better about that.
Yep.
But I think same case that we made with RJ Harvey, talking about Denver and New England offense. We're talking about the Giants. We're talking about Dallas. We're talking about Pittsburgh, and we're talking about Tennessee, and then Denver. Like, to me, it's pretty straightforward. I'm just going to take the bet on the best offense.
Yep. Best offense. That's what it comes down to for me here too. And I need to adjust my ranks a little bit and bring J.K. Dobbins up, but he's the one where easily I think he has the most upside out of this group. I just don't think Javonte runs away with that RB1 role, nor is it really an RB1 role I'd actually want to target. Not that hype out of camp around Jaden Blue has been great, but
oh, yikes.
We don't need to bring that up.
Could have told you guys that, but
yeah, well, it's interesting. Dane Brugler, Hayden Winks pointed this out. Dane Brugler brought that up in his draft guide, NFL draft guide for this past year, that coaches were a little bit concerned about his professionalism. So interesting tidbit to go back and look at when the coaches were already saying that. And we're kind of like, well, yeah, but his on the field looks good. Unfortunately, professionalism matters a little bit more in the NFL.
Then we want to admit. Then we want to admit.
Yeah, that's a good call on that. Then we want to admit. Look, if you don't have your hands on our 2025 fantasy football draft guide, you can go do that now. $10 in the pinned comment down in the description as well. Full set up projections and rankings on 292 players this year. You can get individual team pages with that as well. Sending out updates every 2 weeks. And starting in August, we'll be sending out a weekly update to make sure you are fully prepped, revved up, ready to go for your fantasy drafts. Got a lot more content coming in that as well, so make sure you get your hands on that before your drafts this year. If you want to follow our other socials as well, FFL is on Twitter, the FFL is on Instagram, Fantasy Football Fellas on Facebook and TikTok. And hey, if you're a YouTube person through and through, 100% get it. You don't want to be dealing with that TikTok crap, whatever information they're stealing from you and putting in front of your feed. I don't know if maybe you have strong opinions on that. Fantasy Football Fellas shorts on YouTube. Search that. Go subscribe over there as well. Personal socials, I'm at Lucas Wenzel on X, Tyler_Plath for Ty. Make sure you're subbed here on the YouTube so you know later this week we're doing our wide receiver rankings. You'll get that video as soon as it drops. Best ball stream coming on Wednesday if you missed out on Monday's live stream last night. Ty and I were recording before that. Literally, Ty's going to start going live in like 5 minutes here. If you didn't get to be a part of that, come join our best ball stream. We'd love to hang out and answer your fantasy football questions. And maybe you get to even join our drafts over on Underdog as well. See you later this week. Stay safe, stay healthy, y'all. Deuces.